The moment I saw her storm down the aisle, her face twisted with fury, I knew nothing would go as planned. Karen, the kind of neighbor everyone warns you about, was marching toward my seat as if the airplane were her personal kingdom. She didn't even glance at my boarding pass. All she saw was an opportunity to assert control, to prove that her entitlement mattered more than anyone else's comfort. My heart pounded as I tried to hold my ground, knowing that any misstep could unleash a storm of shrieks, accusations, and humiliation. But what happened next? What unfolded in the next few minutes would completely flip the script and leave everyone around us stunned. Could I really outsmart someone so brazen? Drop your location in comment. Let's see how far this story reaches around the world. I held my boarding pass out, trying to reason with her, but Karen's voice cut through the cabin like a whip. Her eyes were wild with determination, and she refused to acknowledge any authority other than her own. Passengers glanced nervously, some whispering, others watching with disbelief. I knew this wasn't just about a seat. It was a glimpse of the relentless control she wielded in her world, a preview of the chaos she could bring into anyone's life if unchecked. Life in our neighborhood had always felt like a delicate balance between tranquility and tension. I had moved into this small suburban enclave with the hope of quiet evenings, friendly neighbors, and manicured lawns that felt safe for my family. At first, everything seemed perfect. The community had a predictable rhythm. Kids riding bikes in the cul-de-sac, neighbors waving from their porches, and weekend barbecues where laughter mingled with the scent of grilled food. We had no idea that beneath the surface a force of microscopic tyranny lurked. Karen was the kind of neighbor everyone knew without really wanting to. She was loud, assertive, and always ready to point out every tiny imperfection in anyone else's life. A member of the HOA board, she wielded her authority like a weapon, enforcing rules that often bordered on the absurd. I had heard whispers about her past, confrontations, stories of fines over perfectly trimmed hedges, complaints over garden gnomes, even letters sent about lawn chairs placed at unauthorized angles. At first, I dismissed them as exaggerations, the kind of gossip that swirls in small communities. But within days, I realized these warnings were merely the tip of the iceberg. My own property, once a source of pride, soon became a stage for petty inspections. Every morning felt like stepping into a game where the rules changed. Depending on who was watching, it wasn't just about following guidelines. It was about surviving. The scrutiny of a neighbor whose sense of entitlement seemed limitless. And then, like a spark to dry tinder, something as mundane as an airplane seat escalated into a confrontation I would never forget. Little did I know that the same determination that had helped me navigate neighborhood disputes would soon be tested in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. The airplane incident wasn't just a moment of inconvenience. It became the first domino in a series of escalating confrontations. Karen's shrill voice rang through the cabin as she claimed my seat. Refusing to accept any explanation, fellow passengers whispered and stared, but she seemed impervious to social norms or common courtesy. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Yet I also knew that this was familiar territory. Her aggression mirrored the petty tyrannies of the HOA, where she had always taken satisfaction in making others uncomfortable while elevating herself back home. The pattern continued. Notices arrived in the mail about trivial infractions. I hadn't even considered violations. A slightly overgrown hedge, a mismatched mailbox, a flower pot not aligned perfectly with the sidewalk. Each letter carried the weight of authority and the threat of escalating fines. I felt trapped in a system designed to exhaust me, a slow and meticulous erosion of autonomy that preyed on my patience. I tried to reason, to appeal, to find logic. But logic rarely prevailed against someone. Motivated purely by power and self-importance, every confrontation built on the last. Karen's actions became bolder, her expectations more absurd. One afternoon, she inspected our lawn with a clipboard in hand, measuring angles and noting inconsistencies. She left a terse note, demanding corrective action, immediately, as though her scrutiny alone could redefine reality. Tension rippled through the neighborhood. Whispers followed me in grocery stores and parks, neighbors wondering if standing up would mean inviting Karen's wrath into their own lives. I realized that the conflict had grown beyond me. It had become a microcosm of small-town tyranny, the kind of power struggle that feels deeply personal, because it invades your everyday existence. At each step, the stakes felt higher. Any concession seemed like a surrender, any challenge a potential disaster. Yet I also sensed an opportunity, a chance to finally assert boundaries and expose the absurdity of her authority. The tension mounted as I gathered documentation, photographed the violations she claimed, and carefully prepared for the confrontation that would eventually come. Every meeting, every letter, every encounter became a test of resilience, endurance, and strategy. And all the while, I knew the moment of truth, the climax where everything would either implode or vindicate me, was approaching with relentless inevitability. The confrontation began quietly, deceptively so. Karen arrived at the community meeting with her usual aura of confidence, prepared to humiliate anyone who dared oppose her. But this time I was ready. I presented my evidence calmly, methodically dismantling her claims one by one. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as I showed photos, timelines, and correspondence that clearly illustrated the pettiness and inconsistency of her enforcement. Karen's face contorted in disbelief, her controls slipping in real time. Her voice rose, shrill and commanding, trying to reassert dominance. But it fell flat in the face of facts. The room, previously silent in fear, began to murmur in recognition of the injustice she had inflicted. Each statement I made felt like a carefully aimed strike, revealing the absurdity of the rules she wielded and the fragility of the authority she had relied on for so long. The climax wasn't explosive in a physical sense. It was the culmination of patience, strategy, and moral clarity meeting arrogance head-on. Karen's empire of intimidation crumbled, and in that moment, the tension that had dominated, our lives transformed into a collective release of disbelief and vindication. By the end, the room had shifted. Karen's influence diminished, her credibility fractured. The board, once complicit in her petty tyranny, had no choice but to acknowledge the legitimacy of my claims. It was the moment when justice, long delayed, finally arrived, not through loud confrontation, but through meticulous preparation, persistence, and the refusal to back down. The aftermath. The neighborhood slowly adjusted to a new reality. Karen no longer dominated meetings with her overbearing personality, and the community began to breathe more freely. Letters ceased arriving in threatening tones. Lawns could be tended without fear of scrutiny, and simple acts, watering flowers, leaving chairs on the porch, parking a car slightly askew, no longer felt like potential infractions. The HOA had reluctantly accepted that their overreach had been exposed, and a sense of equilibrium returned to the community. Walking down the familiar streets, tending to my yard, I noticed the smallest details that had once gone unnoticed. The way sunlight hit the leaves, the laughter of children playing freely, the way neighbors nodded in acknowledgement without caution or fear. These were more than trivial moments. They were evidence that reclaiming space, physical, mental, and emotional matters. Standing up for oneself doesn't just alter the present moment. It changes perception, it teaches resilience, and it cultivates a quiet confidence that spreads like a subtle, unstoppable current. The lesson was clear. Standing up is never easy, often uncomfortable, and sometimes downright intimidating. But surrendering quietly comes with a cost far greater than confrontation. It allows absurdity, entitlement, and unchecked power to persist, silently eroding the lives of those too timid to speak. The choice is simple in principle but profound in consequence. Either you let others claim what isn't theirs, or you face the absurdity head-on, assert your rights, and reclaim your space. And when that choice is made, when courage meets conviction, the outcome often changes everything, not only for yourself but for everyone who witnesses it, lives in that space, and draws inspiration from the defiance of injustice. In the end, the neighborhood was no longer a place dominated by fear or petty tyranny. It became a place of subtle empowerment, a living proof that civility and courage can coexist, and that one person's stand, calm, measured, and unwavering, can ignite change that resonates far beyond the initial conflict. Every glance, every small act of freedom, every smile shared, without fear, became a testament to what happens when someone refuses to let absurdity dictate their life. And sometimes that quiet refusal is all it takes to reclaim not just your yard, your home, or your seat, but a sense of dignity and control that cannot be taken away.